Hi guys, I'm Tanya, Book Fanatic. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to do a book review for a poetry collection called Every Watering Word by Tanya Manning-Yarde. I received a request via email from Tanya to review her poetry collection, and I accepted that. Since then, I do have to say something about this. I put a review on Goodreads. I have to say it was a very short kind of note review, but those notes were mental notes for myself to put in my video review. After a while, I received an email from Tanya that she didn't think my review was adequate enough, there wasn't enough in my review. I have to tell you here, my review wasn't a positive review, and for me that feels kind of iffy because I do not believe she sent an email about any reviewers who were positive about her book, who had reviews just as short as mine. Besides that, my review was the only 2-star or lower review on Goodreads, and I do not feel good about her emailing me. Since then, I have emailed her back and I have said I'm going to do a video review for your book. I never received any reply back. I want to say this before I start reviewing this book. I do not feel great about that, and I do not feel very happy about reviewing this book anymore. It kind of made me feel iffy about the whole thing. I don't know, I just don't really feel like reviewing this book for this author anymore, but I will do it anyway. Even though it is a negative review, opinions are entirely my own, and I will just be brutally honest here. To be brutally honest here, I have to tell you that I did not like this poetry collection. I am going to point out 2 poems in this collection that I did like, to be fair, because there were 2 poems I liked, but most of this collection was just not my thing. And I put some notes on Goodreads to put into this review, so I will go over those notes and tell you what I didn't like in this collection. But before I do that, I will talk to you about the 2 poems I did like. I have my trusty e-reader here, so I will read those poems to you. The first one I want to read to you is called Grandfather. Grandfather, whose body is lanky and long, like a tower of Babel, yet a silent man without a throat, who is dark skin and gleaming teeth, who is stone-stared and stone-cold, whose hair is white new down, is too sick to ride his bike these days, who I punch lovingly saying the phrase, "Hey granddad," who punch me back chanting, "What you say, Tan?" Who wants to sit on the porch in the sun but who can't and gets angry and smacks us with vile words, who smoked Winston with legs crossed and wrists corded, with bright gold watch, who kept a gun on him, is sickly, is sickening, who leaves for work, he can't remember retiring, who defecates on the couch, who eats slow, painful, and with many needles, who was lastly laying in the old folks' home, who is lying kingly in his vault, talks to me from the blooming lily plant I took home from the funeral, calls to me from the casket cross hung on my front door, is the abandonment of treasure that assaults my heart, the battle cry, "Tan," that the war might stop. This one had a really emotional impact on me and did really make me feel something. It is very moving. From this poem I get that grandfather suffered from Alzheimer's and slowly began to forget everything and eventually also died. I've never had any encounters with Alzheimer's, but I did think this poem was very moving. It sounds like a horrible thing to go through with someone you love so dearly, and I really got that through this poem. The other poem I want to read to you is called Civility. 2 ancient women sit again in the brown lackluster pews, hair transfigured, bowing into tilted pillars and spirals of grey, leathered skin, clouding eyes hovering over plains of memories. One in royal blue suit, matching feathered hat, the other in crisp spring green, black felt with green trim. Their tastes date them to when my grandmother was a child. It is Black History Month at the church. The choir's robed wings retreat. The sweat from praise and stomp of jubilee simmering down. The pastor rises, ceremonially sips his water. I listen to him. Speaks of historical wealth suffered unto Jews in Egypt, the affliction and purification that came from wandering in the desert. I watch the sermon swell in the adults, voices raise in confirmation crying out hallelujah, gloved hands wave in testimony. His sermon churns them as he weaves the historical narrative of faithful ancestors to weary, wary descendants. Churns the hollow in hearts calling forth in empathy, to read the briar of how we came from those times through these times. Peppering the congregation, the saints and shadows, from the Egypt of the south, shake their ropes and chains, drag them up and down the aisles. And growing, bloody blooms in pews, besieged, exhumed, they drag their bones throughout their home, recounting charred harvest of picnic hatred, Gunshots, gallops, gavels, gnashing. The work song, the one thing synchronizing, the salt sweating swarm. The adults recognize the visitors, the archival kin. As I look around, faces become the mirrors of forlorn ancestors. Cracking harbors, faces spill brine, oceans of memory into bleached cotton handkerchiefs. And this poem mentions Black History Month, and I got from this poem that it was about black people being in church and it being Black History Month and slavery back in the day. These black people being slaves and working on cotton plantations, and now them using cotton handkerchiefs that they didn't have to work their butt off to create. I also thought this one was so moving, and I did think these two poems I just mentioned were pretty great. I just had a couple of problems with the poetry collection in general, and I don't want to say with this that the book isn't worth reading, because it is, and there are so many important messages in this collection about being black, about slavery, about the menstrual cycle, literally everything. This author, Tanya, touched upon everything there is to touch upon, and I think she has some very important things to say. But aside from that, I just did not like the poems in this book, and I can't help it, but I will explain to you why I did not like them that much. It's not like I have some personal vendetta against the author or something, I just did not like her work. And I also want to say again that it's not appropriate to email a reviewer that their review is not adequate when it is negative. That's how I interpreted it anyway. I didn't feel very good about that. The first point I want to make is, for these poems, to some of them I couldn't relate at all, and that might be because I am not black, I don't have ancestors who were slaves, can't relate in that way, and some of these poems just didn't touch me like that. Like the way they were written, I just didn't have any connection to them. And that is because I don't have a connection to them. So they have less of an impact on me. And poems for me need to have some sort of impact, because that is the magic of poetry. Not just that, the magic of poetry is also that it doesn't have to touch me, but it can touch someone else. And that is great. But in this case, it just didn't for me. And I think I have the right to write my own review, to give my own star rating based upon my own subjective experience. With some of these poems, I also had the problem that a lot of the same words were used over and over and over again. And it wasn't like in some conscious way. It wasn't like in the same poem, like they were supposed to bounce off of each other. It was in different poems. A lot of the same words were used. Like two examples I have of this is the word tabernacle and alley. They were used in multiple different poems. And I just like to have some word variety in my poems. At the point where I start to notice that the same word pops up over and over and over again in these poems, I start to get annoyed a little bit, and I don't think that's a good thing. Also, some of these poems were very, very sexual. I don't have an explanation why I don't like that. It's just, I don't like it. It's as simple as that. I don't like sexual poems. They're not my thing. I feel uncomfortable reading them, and I didn't know that these poems in this book were going to be sexual. It isn't in the synopsis that these poems are going to be so in-depth. The only way I would have figured out that these poems were sexual was by reading the poetry collection. And after reading the poetry collection, which I got for a review, this is my opinion. I didn't like the sexual poems. I can leave out this opinion of mine, but that's not fair because I was asked for a review and I'm giving my review. And I like the touching poems, like the abstract poems, but some of these just went way in depth and I did not feel comfortable reading them, and that is just how it is. Last point I want to make is, maybe I'm stupid or something, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. But I just didn't get some of these poems. I didn't get the meaning behind some of them. And the meaning might be very clear to the author, but when I was reading them, maybe because I don't have the same experiences that the author does, I just didn't get some of them. I didn't get what they were about. There's also a thing, a subjective experience I have with this collection that I can include in my review and in my star rating of this book, because I did not feel them. If I don't get a poem, I'm not going to feel your experience, your feelings when you were writing this poem. Overall, like the sexual poems I didn't like. I didn't get some of the poems. A lot of the same words were used, and I didn't have a connection to most of the poems. Overall, that relates to a negative experience with a poetry collection. I don't have anything else to judge this poetry collection upon except for the poems. So with a fiction book, this is so different because there are so many elements to a fiction book, and a poetry collection is just based upon that poetry. I can't judge it on world building or plot or characters because there aren't any of those elements in a poetry collection. I can just base it upon these poems, and this is my experience with this poetry collection. So I hope I made my point of view clear here. I rated this poetry collection 2 stars based upon my experience, and I think I had a valid experience. My opinions are valid, my experience is valid, and I feel like I need to address it in this review. And as you can see, I get quite worked up about this because I don't like when an author emails me about reviewing their book and I say yes, and then I review their book, and then it suddenly is not good enough because my experience with their book was negative. Honestly, I don't have any more to say about this. I think I touched upon this enough. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you enjoyed my opinion. Let me know down below what you thought about this review. Do you agree or disagree with anything I just said? I would love to know. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.